Do a couple more audio checks. Mr. Lockhart, could you say something real quick so we can see and hear you? Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. White. How are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Doing all right. Just want to make sure we can hear you. And David Abelson, could you say something real quick so we can hear you?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I'm sorry, once again, Fraser Lockhart, could you say something real quick? We didn't hear you before.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you this morning?
There you are. Good to see you. Good to hear you.
I'm just trying to keep an eye on the participants who have signed in just to make sure we have the majority of people. I know we're right at the top of the hour.
Yes, we are. Ms. Fitzgerald, Amy Fitzgerald, could you say something real quick so we can make sure you're okay?
How's everyone doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Good.
Kelly, just let me know when you're ready to begin.
Sounds good. I'm watching the names roll in. We have a couple of people who are just logging on right now. If Chuck can finish his mic check, I think we have 2 or 3 more people to check, and then we should be good to go.
Okay.
I'm trying to go down the list here. Kristen Ellis, how are you? Could you say something real quick?
Can you hear me, Chuck?
I hear you. Thank you.
Great.
And Jocelyn Nahigian, could you say hi? Or not? And Josiah Pinkham, sorry.
Yep, Josiah Pinkham right here.
Pinkham, thank you. Mr. Rispoli, I see you're on. Could you say something real fast?
Yes, hello here. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, sir. Who else have I not checked in? Shelley Wilson, could you say hi?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I think you got everyone, Chuck.
Still have a few. Is Mr. Mullis on? Jay Mullis, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We hear you. Thank you. Melinda Comfort. I don't see you listed.
She will be coming later.
Okay.
She's towards the end of our agenda.
I think I've tested with everyone that's on.
Great. Thank you so much, Chuck. We really appreciate your support. And Jack, I think it's your turn now.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Jack Craig. I'm the Vice Chair of the EMAB, and I'd like to call the meeting to order today and welcome the EMAB members, EM staff, and members of the public to the Environmental Management Advisory Board's December public meeting. Please remember to mute yourself when you're not speaking and use the hand feature on Zoom in case you have questions, and that will help prevent us from crosstalk in the meeting today. This meeting is currently being live streamed to the public on the EM Headquarters Advisory Board's YouTube channel. Members of the public were given an opportunity prior to this meeting to submit written comments to be read into the record during the meeting today. in the public comment section of the meeting. The EMAB staff did not receive any written comments. Members of the public may submit written comments to be included in the meeting minutes by next Monday, December 20th. In accordance with the Federal Advisory Board, Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA, everything said during the course of the proceedings will be made available to the public in written meeting minutes. Those who are interested in learning more about EMAB are encouraged to visit our website at www.em.doe.gov/EMAB or contact the EM designated federal officer, Kelly Snyder, who's joining us here today. EMAB members are required to recuse themselves from participation in any meeting, study, recommendations, or other board activities that would have a direct and predictable effect on the companies, organizations, agencies, or other entities with whom they are personally associated or in which they have a financial interest. For the agenda today, we'll first hear from Senior Advisor for Environmental Management, Ike White, and he will have time to take some questions. Then we'll hear from EM's Acting Associate Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Regulatory and Policy Affairs, Jay Mullis. Afterwards, we'll take a short break and come back to receive an ethics briefing from the Office of General Counsel. This briefing is mandatory for all special government employees. If you're unable to join that portion of the meeting today, please let Kelly and Alyssa know, and they can schedule another time for you to be briefed. Before I turn it over to Ike White, I'd like to certify our meeting minutes from our last spring meeting that were circulated prior to this call. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Say no. Okay, thank you, everyone. The meeting minutes are approved. And so on to our agenda today. Most of you are very familiar with Ike White, the Senior Advisor for the Office of Environmental Management. Ike has been leading EM since June of 2019. And thank you, Ike, for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jack. I'll try to keep my comments brief so we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. First of all, I just want to say thank you to Jack, to you in particular, for continuing in a leadership role on the EMAB, and thanks to all of the other members as well. I think I've mentioned this most of the times that we've gathered together, but I'll say it again because it warrants repeating, and I really do feel this way. But I really do thank all of you, each and every one of you, for your commitment to public service. This is not the kind of thing that you would do if you did not, one, have a commitment to public service, and two, have a passion for what we do in the cleanup program, and in support of our mission. And so I know it's certainly not a job that we pay all of you an enormous amount of money for. So I really do appreciate the fact that all of you have the will and the desire to engage in public service in this fashion. So just want to make sure I take the opportunity at the very beginning to thank all of you for doing that and for working so hard to provide a program that I know all of you care deeply about with the best of your advice. Just a couple of things I kind of wanted to touch on today. One, it's good to be meeting with you. This is a virtual format. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, we can get back to having in-person meetings. I know for some of us, one of our first in-person meetings in a while was the cleanup workshop last week, and it was good to see a few of you who were there at the cleanup workshop. It was nice to see, to be able to see you in person. One of the things that strikes me whenever I think of the cleanup program over the past couple of years is two things. One is the challenge and the level of difficulty of operating in our current and still somewhat changing environment. Certainly not something I anticipated when I agreed to come aboard as the senior advisor for EM almost 2.5 years ago. But it's also amazing the amount of progress that's been made across the country despite having to work in that environment. And I think that's a testament to the relationships that we have with our workforce, with the companies who do the work, at all of our sites with the state regulators, and we'll probably talk a little bit about that in a bit, and with the communities around our sites. And so if you kind of take a look and go site by site, I think the progress that has been made is actually fairly extraordinary. And so one of the things I want to take a little bit of time to do is just highlight for all of you some of the things that we've got done. I think much of it since the last time that we met and talked about the program. I was just at Savannah River, I think a couple of weeks ago, with the deputy secretary, and had a chance there to take a close look at our liquid waste program. Very, very significant progress continues to be made at the site as they sort of get past the point of having put all the infrastructure in place and move forward to the point of treating all of the liquid waste at Savannah River. I was able to celebrate getting the last of the SDUs that was built done ahead of schedule and under budget, and breaking ground on all of the remaining ones that we will need to complete the liquid waste mission there. Had a chance to talk to the SWPF team, and they're processing record amounts of liquid waste at this point. So very kudos go out to all the folks who've helped make that happen. And again, another one of those cases where having really good alignment on the program, I think, has really made a substantial difference at Savannah River. And you can see that in the fact that we now at the site have a very clear vision from getting where we are now to getting to the point where we have the tanks closed at Savannah River. We're also making a lot of progress at Hanford. I mean, Hanford is an even more daunting challenge than Savannah River, but just over the last few weeks, we have passed some fairly significant milestones in the program. Just last week, participated in a discussion within the department's project groups on getting to CD4A for the tank side cesium removal system. So I expect that now that we're done with construction on the system and we're ready to operate it, I expect that to actually be pre-treating the tank waste at Hanford going into the low activity vitrification capability we're putting in place within weeks, literally, right? So by early next year, we will be treating tank waste at Hanford. And that is a fairly significant milestone. And when you look at the facility that waste stream is going to feed, the low activity waste vitrification capability, we completed over the last few months, we've completed a major systems test with the loss of power testing. That went well. And within the next few weeks, we will perform the last major system test, the heat up of the melter. And with those major system tests being done, really what's left for the vitrification plant in Hanford is just going through the very long, and for those of you who've been through it before, very, very meticulous process of commissioning to make sure that a nuclear facility of that complexity and size is really ready to operate. But it is a couple of major milestones at Hanford associated with our liquid waste program there. At Idaho, we're continuing to make progress. We have started the heat up process for the integrated waste treatment unit. We're in the process of completing that heat up cycle and preparing for the introduction of simulant. Very hopeful that with a couple of months of simulant run, demonstrating that all the process changes and improvements we put in place over the last few years have been successful, that we'll be ready to begin radioactive waste operations on the liquid waste system at Idaho by sometime early next year. So, very significant step at Idaho towards treatment of the liquid waste there. We're also making progress at Idaho on the solid waste side as well, and on spent fuel in terms of repackaging and preparing the spent fuel inventory that we have at Idaho. At Oak Ridge, the site there continues to capitalize on the progress they've made with getting done with ETTP by moving the workforce very successfully over into doing D&D for the broader site. For those of you who follow our DOE excess facilities across the complex, and one of the iconic excess facilities that we had in the department was the biology complex at Y12. As you drive into the Y12 plant, it was a giant red, enormous example of aging, dilapidated infrastructure that you could see as you headed into the main entrance of the Y12 plant. Today, it's gone. The team there did the demolition of that work and got it done ahead of schedule and under budget. Also began work as well within the campus of ORNL, helped bring up space at ORNL for future science missions and facilities there. So very good work by the team pivoting from the D&D at ETTP over into D&D on the main campuses of Y12 and ORNL. Made progress at Portsmouth as we wrapped up the enrichment work at Oak Ridge, the next site for our major D&D of former enrichment facilities is at Portsmouth. Substantial progress already on building 326 Paducah. A lot of folks think about nuclear hazards when they think about the cleanup program, but there are hazards of all sorts from an environmental perspective within what used to be the footprint of the weapons or civil nuclear energy research for DOE. And at Paducah, over the past year, over 1.5 million pounds of hazardous refrigerant have been disposed of. At ETAC, we finished the last of the buildings that DOE owns on our campus there, and are now working with the state on a path forward for the soils cleanup, which will wrap up the department's cleanup effort at ETAC. West Valley, the team there continues to make progress on ancillary buildings, getting ready to start the main plant process demolition work over the course of the next few months. Los Alamos, a couple of major pieces of work done over the course of the past year. We met our priority goal of getting at least 30 shipments of legacy transuranic waste shipped from the Mesa down to WIP. And we have made a significant progress at taking a look at the emerging issue we had over a year ago at DP Road, finished the work there to what we hope will be the end of the cleanup work, and are now in the process of characterizing the site to make sure that we really got it this time. But significant work, I know it was important to the community around Los Alamos. WIP continues to make progress and on some of the infrastructure work that's needed to make that facility really operational for the cleanup program of the, not just now, but also over the next few years. The ventilation system, the safety significant confinement ventilation system, new subcontractors on board, making significant progress there. Got a permit from the state on the utility shafts, so we're moving forward in that regard. I'm also continuing to receive waste safely. I think just a few weeks ago, milestone of the 13,000th safe shipment of waste to WIP. Very significant milestone for the folks there in Carlsbad. Moab, where we're sort of moving dirt from one place to the other, but we're moving it away from the Colorado River and putting it in a disposal cell a number of miles away. The site passed the 12 million ton milestone of waste removed at Moab. They're now hitting the most significant productivity in terms of the amount of waste that we're moving since the days of the Recovery Act. So fairly significant set of work being done in a very difficult operating environment across the EM complex, and certainly very pleased with all of the folks who are helping make that happen. We're also getting ready to think about what the workplace and the work environment of the future looks like. Like many private companies and public agencies across the country, we're beginning to think about what the workforce looks like post-pandemic and how we work in a hybrid and telework environment. I certainly expect some amount of change from what we had before the pandemic. And I also expect that no matter how we start out in the January, February timeframe, that one of the things that's absolutely certain is that we need to learn from that exercise and continue to evolve. And as we get feedback from the folks coming back into the physical workplace in terms of what that work environment looks like going forward. So I know that'll be a significant challenge on both for the companies involved and for the federal managers as we work with the workforce and what the workplace of the future looks like. We've also made a number of personnel changes. One of the folks that you'll get to, I heard talk to later today, Jay Mullis, is acting as our head of intergovernmental and policy at headquarters. We were able to talk Jay into stepping away from his day job as the Oak Ridge manager. I think it's important that we move folks back and forth, and very pleased that we were able to get one of our field office managers to take on a significant headquarters role as well. I think that benefits the overall program when you have field folks in headquarters positions and vice versa. Number of other new faces: Mike Neucker is the chief of staff, Eric Olds is a senior advisor to Todd, but also acting as our head of communications. John Jones, who, having wrapped up the last of the building demolition at ETech, is now heading up our site liaisons at headquarters. Mary Kruger, many of you may have known from her role in EM4, has moved over to be our DAS for resource management, working on two of the things that are the most important to the program: people with the HR function and money with the budget function. Angela Watmore, who's been acting as our head of contracting, or serving as our head of contracting over the course of the past year or so, has done a great job managing a very difficult and challenging environment from the contract space over the course of the past year or so. And Kristen Ellis, all of you know, who's leading our intergovernmental effort. At the same time, we've also brought in some field folks. Joel Bradburn, we announced this week, is going to be the new manager permanently at Portsmouth Paducah. Mike Nicolanus was announced recently at Los Alamos. And while Jay is at headquarters, Laura Wilkinson is acting at Oak Ridge. So very much pleased with the bench strength that we've had in the program and the movement of personnel around the complex. Going forward, a couple of things that we're working on beyond just the program. Certainly the strategic vision continues to be important to me. So we're working on the update for that document for release early next year. I think that's a very important tool that we've developed over the course of the past couple of years for communicating with our workforce, with the companies who do work at our sites, and also with our various state and local partners in terms of what we see the program looking like going forward over the course of the next decade. It's actually been very helpful and formed the basis of a number of productive conversations I've had with communities, state regulators, tribal nations. So look forward to continuing to evolve and mature that document. Over the course of the next year, would certainly expect to see the document next year reflect the priority of this administration. In addition to the environmental cleanup effort, we'll certainly spend a little time talking about the context in which we do that from a sustainability and resilience perspective, discussion about workforce and increasing the diversity of our workforce, environmental justice, which I think EM is sort of for the past 3 decades really is the kind of the epitome of what it means to be an environmental justice program, but certainly expect to see the program looked at from that lens going forward into the future. The other thing that I, certainly will be a focus of mine going forward, and I really appreciate all of the effort that all of you spent into taking a look at the subject over the past few months and making recommendations in that regard, is our relationship with regulators. Yeah, I think I mentioned before, one of the things that's always been interesting to me from an EM perspective versus the work I did in NNSA. On the NNSA side, the system for setting requirements, developing funding, and then executing was mostly contained within the federal government. You would set requirements with the Department of State, Department of Defense, and others in an administration interagency process that would culminate in OMB working within the administration on proposing a program with funding to Congress. Congress would act on that, and then the program would execute whatever came out of that process. A lot more complicated, as all of you know, on the EM side, particularly when it comes to the requirement setting piece of the cleanup program. Our communities and in particular our state regulators have a very significant say in setting the requirements for the program, and the relationships that we have with those groups are really important in terms of making sure that we help set requirements that optimize the program at large across the country and make sense from a risk perspective. So really do appreciate the thought and effort that went into that, and that continues to be a focus for me personally going forward over the course of the next year. So with that, I think I said I wanted to keep my remarks brief. Hopefully I've done that to allow time for questions and discussions. But again, I want to close by, again, thanking all of you for your continuing commitment to public service and your continuing commitment to the environmental cleanup program. Thank you. Jack?
Yeah, thanks, Ike. So we'll open it up for a few questions. I'm not sure what your time frame is here, Ike, but we'll just see where we go here. Anybody have any questions? I don't see any hands up. I'm trying to, once again, see if I can, I do see Jim Rispoli.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I thank you for a really great recap. I mean, so many of these things go back a number of years and brought back mixed memories, some of them great, some of them, I remember the early discussions, for example, about direct feed law, although in those days we called it early law. And the objective was to do the same thing you're doing, get something done. But in any event, I was looking at the latest in the trade press on WIP, and it brings me back, to thinking about why do we continue, and it's not just an EM, why do we continue to have problems with nuclear quality construction? And as I think about it more, and the main ones that come to my mind, it seems to be mostly with subcontractors. Do you think it's the way that the primes select the sub? Are they forced to go with low bid? Do they go with price and other factors where they can consider quality? Or is it a workforce issue, or is it a manufacturing issue? Why does this persist, that the nuclear industry in general cannot seem to solve these quality issues?
Well, if I could solve that problem very easily, I think it would have already been solved. But a couple of thoughts specific to WIP. One is, WIP poses an even more complex challenge perhaps than is typical in the nuclear industry, because what you also have as you're dealing with WIP is a mining environment, right? So you're sort of combining the very unique requirements of the mining industry. You add into those the very rigorous requirements we have on the nuclear side, and then you add into that the often cumbersome process of government contracting, and all of those things I think combine to make it a fairly complex set of requirements for anybody to have to operate in that environment. I think when you look at WIP specifically, I think maybe there were a couple of things. One, I think it's obvious that maybe there were issues with subcontracting. My sense is we brought a new subcontractor on board as that program is now, that project is much improved and moving forward at the pace that we would expect. So certainly that no doubt played a role in what you're seeing. I think our level of attention and oversight of subcontracting perhaps sometimes isn't what it is when you're dealing with direct contracts. And so maybe there's more of a time lag. And so there's a little bit more time for issues and problems to develop before we take the kinds of action we need to take when you're dealing with, just because of the layers of people that exist between subcontracting and all the way up through the folks that are been empowered to kind of make decisions based on what they're seeing from an oversight perspective. So I think that certainly contributes to the problem as well. And then, occasionally there are things that are just outside folks' control, unfortunately, and things sometimes just don't work out. And I think that also played a role in this particular case. So it's a combination of those things. I don't know that it's the circumstances related to WIP, though. Even if we fixed all of those, would fix the broader issues across the community. I think certainly still see challenges on the nuclear quality side. I mean, one of the challenges I think the industry faces going forward is just the fact that the numbers of people and vendors and suppliers involved in the nuclear business is not quite what it used to be, right? And so you're kind of relying on a little bit of a shrinking talent pool in that regard, and that's going to make it more complex going forward as well. Certainly, I'm hopeful that the efforts put in place by this administration and also pushed by previous administration to revitalize the nuclear power industry will certainly play dividends in that regard, because the Department of Energy also, to a large extent, relies a lot on the same sort of vendor supplier database when it comes to things like quality and nuclear quality. So certainly, very hopeful that those efforts are successful moving forward. I don't know if that exactly answered your question, Jim, but
No, it did. I thank you very much. I think you covered a couple of really key points. Yeah. And, the shrinking supplier base, vendor base, I think they need a shot in the arm. And if they can get it through this, that would be great. And I think your comment about the oversight of subs, I remember years ago at Hanford when, I forget a high percentage, 90% of all the wells that were fabricated in a factory failed the examination on site. And we learned then that we had to provide direct oversight of subcontractor vendors and things like that. So I think you hit a lot of good points. And I think I thank you for that. I'm glad that you're on those. Thank you.
Thanks. So Fraser, I see you're the next hand up, and we had a question earlier about how do you raise your hand in this Zoom environment. If you go down to the tab at the bottom of the screen there, there's a little icon called reactions, and you can raise your hand through that little icon. So Fraser, you're next.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jack. Ike, I was really pleased to hear the continuing focus you have and priority you put to the regulatory interactions and also the coordination with the various communities around the complex. I was interested on how you feel EM is doing, particularly in the community interactions during this time when in-person meetings are difficult, and some of the past road tours to get around to communities, I'm sure have been significantly impacted, and how well you feel that communication is actually working out.
So that's been one of the challenges, I think, of the last couple of years from the pandemic. My sense is that we've done as well as we could do with substituting virtual meetings and discussions, and to be fair, those things do occasionally have some advantages over in-person meetings. I think for a few of the discussions and a few of the meetings, we've actually been able to get broader participation than perhaps we might have gotten from in-person meetings, and I think that's a benefit. And maybe we should think about going forward. How do we continue to look at ways to do that? Because increased participation and increased discussion is good. But we also, I think, have been relying a little bit on relationship building that had already occurred before the pandemic started, right? I mean, one of the things that makes a virtual conversation a lot easier is when you already know all of the people who are on the other side of for me, it's my iPad, right? So I'm staring right now at my iPad. The fact that I already know almost all of you helps make this a much easier virtual interaction. But my sense is that over time, that kind of wanes. Either people come and go and you get new people that you don't know, and that interaction isn't quite the same. And even for the people you do know, that the relationship isn't the same if you don't see folks in person from time to time. And again, that's my personal perception. Certainly when I was at the cleanup workshop last week, I really did enjoy the chance I had to catch up and meet with some folks, whether it was state regulators or community leaders or some of the companies who do work for us at our sites over in person over the course of a couple of days. But I think going forward, we have to reestablish those in-person dialogues and that in-person communication, because I think that's one of the things from my point of view that is really important that we work to establish and strengthen coming out of the pandemic, because I don't know that we could continue virtually indefinitely without having a significant impact. I think we've managed it over the course of 18 months, 24 months, but I think that's not something that I would want to see continue indefinitely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ike. David Abelson, you're next.
Thanks, Jack, and thanks, Ike. I agree just about your comments about the value of last week of the cleanup workshop and seeing people. And it was, I really realized when I was there how much I needed that and missed that. And so that was a good opportunity that hopefully we'll have more as we move forward. I wanted to pull two things together. Something Jack said last week at the cleanup workshop, and then your comments a moment ago about the relationship with regulators. Last week, Jack said that the siting, the community have to agree on end state. And my addendum to that would be what you said a moment ago about the regulatory agency as well. And really what that means is not just a technical matter of the regulatory agency, but also as a political matter with the governor's office. Can you just speak a little bit to that broad agreement on end state and that broad agreements amongst the community, amongst DOE and its contractor, the state, and also I would throw in Congress?
Well, I mean, it's one of the ways I think about it, right, is if you have really good alignment, then all of the energy and the effort going into the system can be focused on making progress towards the goal that everybody is aligned to doing, right? And I think we have a fairly good example of that at Savannah River now with our liquid waste system. It's all of the effort, all of the discussion, all of the dialogue back and forth can all be put into the concept of how do you make progress against the plan that we all share and that we all have. And so that's a fairly straightforward way. And at that point, it really becomes about program execution. And then it's on the cleanup program, and it's on us and the companies who do work for us at the site to just go out and execute. When you don't have that, right? When you have lots of different perspectives, some of which may be completely different, either relative to the end state that you're trying to get towards, or even concerning the process by which you plan to get there, then you spend a fairly significant amount of effort moving the ball in circles without making progress, as you sort of bat back and forth trying to figure out what exactly it is you want to do, because the program is very reluctant to move forward aggressively in an environment where we don't have buy-in to the plan for what it is. My sense with working with Congress is they're less enthusiastic about making investments in a program when there's less certainty about what that program is and is going to be. And the communities, are going to be less vocally supportive if they don't have alignment and buy-in. And then the regulators, if they don't have alignment and buy-in, are going to spend a lot of time focused on using regulatory tools to try to change that perspective rather than help the program move forward. So for all kinds of reasons, it makes for a very inefficient set of operating conditions to operate in an environment where you don't have alignment. So for me, that's one of the most important keys to being successful with having a program that really makes optimum progress is having everybody on board with what exactly it is you're trying to do and where exactly it is you're trying to go.
Thank you. Amy Fitzgerald, you're next.
Yeah. Thanks, Ike, for being here. It was good to see you last week as well.
You as well.
Wanted to follow up kind of on part of Jim's comments and David's comments. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting last week was listening to Dr. Huff talk about the administration's commitment to new nuclear and research and looking at the role EM can play in moving the climate action agenda forward. And I wondered if you could follow up just for a minute about that, because our site was, we kind of concerned when we see the EM budget, the administration's budget from last year come out, and wondered what can we do to help improve the communication that part of the end state, so to speak, for sites like ETTP and certainly others across the complex is creating opportunities for those new missions that will help other divisions of the Department of Energy achieve their missions as well. So just want to get your thoughts on what can we do to help improve that communication that, part of the EM mission is to clean up, but also to make those sites available for reindustrialization for other missions. There's a lot of discussion about that throughout the energy communities.
Well, I mean, just a couple of thoughts on that. One, on a little bit of it, I think, gets back to the discussion earlier on alignment, right? And I think in cases where you do have alignment and effective communication of that alignment, that when you look at the system as a whole from a government perspective, from the cleanup program, OMB, the budget proposals, and then working with Congress in terms of what budgets actually are, and you can see that in the 22 marks, for example, for the House and the Senate appropriations this year. I think the outcome of that overall system is generally very favorable, and I think we've seen that at Oak Ridge year in and year out. And I think a large part of that is due to the fact that the community and the department have been very successful at communicating the alignment in terms of what we're doing and what we're trying to get done. And you probably noticed Congressman Fleischman's address at Oak Ridge, I think, speaks a little bit to that alignment. It's alignment in a bipartisan fashion, and I think it's helped drive the progress that you're talking about. So, at the end of the day, it's about communication with key stakeholders, right? So for the program, when I look out from my vantage point, whether it's dealing with local communities or dealing with state regulators or tribal nations or state governments or members of Congress or committee staff. I have an obligation to make sure that the program communicates the program's perspective, but then the communities also do the same, right? And whether it's particularly important from a community perspective, because the community leaders, I think for the cleanup program, I think of them as representing our customer base, if you will, right? Why do we have a cleanup program? We have a cleanup program to repair the environment around communities where we've had legacy environmental damage over the course of the last 70 years. And as you pointed out, to prepare those sites for a different economic future once the cleanup program is done. And the local communities where all of those folks live, I think, have a very important voice in terms of communicating what it is that we all collectively would like to see. And they have a very important voice, not just in communicating that to the cleanup program, but also in communicating that to their state regulators and to the folks on the Hill who fund the cleanup work. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I think when we all have alignment in terms of what that looks like, I think those communications become significantly more powerful in terms of helping drive the desired outcome.
Right. Thank you.
We have time for just maybe one or two more questions.
So, Jack, did you want, I'll put my hand up, but did you want to go ahead since you had your hand
No,
up?
I just had a couple closing comments. So go ahead, Shelley.
Sure. So, again, just much applause. Hats off to you, Ike, and to all of EM for the tremendous strides that you've made, especially in very challenging circumstances. I just, I really always am heartened to hear you talk about the alignment, since that's kind of the heartbeat of what I've always been most attentive to. So I just wanted to add in that that actually Jay Mullis led the charge on some improved regulatory relationships back in 2020, and one of those core teams of regulators, just to add into the thought about telemeeting versus in person. One of those core teams actually met for a year and a half over Zoom, never having met in person ever, and did a significant amount of work over that year and a half, purely over Zoom. And the EPA representative actually said, wow, I think we actually developed better relationships over Zoom because we talked more often than if we had gotten together in person. So I certainly agree with everything said before. There's nothing like physical and being in present interaction. So I agree with all that wholeheartedly. But the Zoom, those can be actually quite powerful as well. And I agree with your thoughts about using that in the future where it makes sense. But I guess my question is, back at Savannah River, really in 2005, that's when we started building that alignment on high level waste. And of course, it's paying off big time now, and with all of the great work that EM has done. But the advantage and benefit of that early alignment it was crucial in building that momentum. And so when I talk with a lot of sites now, they're like, oh, we're fine with the regulators. But yet I see that they have upcoming big challenges ahead of them. And I'm wondering, my question to you is, what do you see as the advantage of the investment in that early alignment, really before you hit a wall, before you hit a renegotiation, before you hit a big challenge, really the investment, way ahead of time in that alignment so that it pays off when it gets to be a critical point?
So, I think the thing that's the most important for me from the early alignment is the concept of trust, right? Because what it seems to me that you get out of early alignment and early communication and early relationship building as you begin to acquire a sense of trust, right? And so, maybe a little bit more about what I mean by that. If you're dealing with someone and you're dealing with someone with whom you've had a productive working relationship, and you've been able to work together effectively in the past. When you come upon a difficult issue or a difficult challenge, right, you approach it from the perspective of having trust in yourself, trust in the other party, and trust in everybody's motives and willingness to try to work together towards a constructive outcome, right? And that is enormously important when you get to an actually difficult and challenging situation, is to have that trust, so that you're not miscommunicating or misperceiving motives, or the kinds of things that make dealing without that level of trust just a lot more difficult, right? So I mean, it's important from the obvious thing that getting early alignment helps kind of steer the ship, and you get it headed in the right direction, and then the stuff that comes along after that tends to be more course changes, and then that work is a lot easier than trying to do it all at once when it's really, really difficult. But it's also important from my point of view to have had that time period and that opportunity to develop the kind of trust you need to really be successful. I think, at Hanford, this is one of the things that I think is so important about our current effort to just get something started related to the treatment of high-level waste at Hanford, right? It's about establishing the fact that if we have an agreement on something and we get alignment on it and everybody works together, then we can achieve collectively and together a positive outcome, and then build on that positive outcome to begin tackling the more difficult challenges, and then leverage that success and hopefully that trust that gets built up to then work on harder and harder issues.
Thank you.
Great, Ike. And just a couple comments as we close with Ike here. So totally agree on Ike's last comment on trust. I think that's the kind of the outcome of all the effort on alignment, collaboration, is building that trust, so you have it in place when you get to those hard decisions. Two other things, like you mentioned earlier, I just wanted to kind of reinforce that I think are really positive things that are going on. One is you talked about personnel, and you talked about the movement of people between headquarters and the field. You talked maybe about John Jones and Jay Mullis and Eric. I know there's others like Nicole and Todd Schrader and Michael Michelanis who've also done that. I really think that's important. I think it really gives the individual a better perspective of the whole program, and I think so it helps the individual in their development. But I really think it helps the organization make better decisions. So I just think that's a great thing going on within the organization. And the second is on leadership. So I was at the cleanup workshop last week, and one of the things that stood out to me was the session that they had with Hanford, and it was all virtual, so it came across very well. But one of the things that struck me was from a contractor standpoint, I think there are 4 major contractors there. The level of alignment, collaboration, and working together among the 4 contractors was pretty obvious in that presentation. And you talked about focusing on one big thing out there. I really think it was a good thing to see everybody in alignment with the DOE vision out there. And I know that doesn't happen naturally. So it is really a testament to the DOE leadership out there. I know that Brian was on and coordinating all of it. So I just wanted to highlight that too. I think Brian's done a really good job of focusing everybody on the mission there and getting everybody to work together. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 things.
Thanks, Jack. I very much appreciate that, and I will second your perspective on Hanford. I think Brian has done an incredible job of working to get alignment with all the companies who do work at the site. I mean, the other nice thing about the DFLAW project is it doesn't just involve one of the major contractors, right? I mean, in order for it to be successful, they pretty much all have to deliver very significant components of their work scope in order for the department to be successful at the end of the day. And the thing that's really impressive over the course of the last few months is the teamwork and collaboration that I've seen from all of them under Brian's leadership to actually make that happen. It has been an incredibly important part of getting to where we are at this point.
Yep. So thanks, Ike. I know you need to take off, and we will appreciate all your words and your willingness to take questions. So we'll move on to the next speaker, and it's Mr. Jay Mullis, I believe. Hi, Jay.
Hey, Jack. How are you?
Doing great, thanks.
Certainly good to be here and see some familiar faces, and of course, some folks that I don't know, but I look forward to getting to know you. As we talked about, well, there we go, everybody's moving around again. As we talked about doing virtual meetings like this, sorry, I'm multitasking here, trying to get things back where I want them. One of the things I find disconcerting is every so often something happens and everybody just moves around. And I'm starting to get somewhat used to that. I have to wonder if when we go back to in-person meetings and I ever have a physical staff meeting again, if I'm gonna make everybody every so often get up and just move around in the room. So it makes it kind of hard to keep up with everybody. And the other thing I've noticed is I fidget a lot. You normally don't see yourself, but on these things you do. So I fidget a lot, touch my face way too much for a COVID environment, but luckily no COVID yet. So again, good to be here. Thank you for having me. Certainly we've read your regulatory report, and I'd like to thank you for all volunteering your time, especially to create such a detailed and well-written report. I know you don't get paid a lot for these things, and so we certainly always appreciate the time folks volunteer. And it shows you really want to make a difference and really want to give some input, and we certainly value opinions. And we'll work and implement your recommendations. You'll hear more about that in a few minutes. Today, I want to touch briefly on some of the waste disposal highlights that I mentioned earlier. Some of this will be a bit of a repeat for you, but more detail. There's some very important, these are very important to our cleanup mission and associated activities. And having just come to headquarters from the field, I might be a little biased, but our sites are doing some incredible work, especially during the pandemic. We certainly achieved a historic slate of accomplishments during FY20 and 21. Really more than I would have thought, especially being in the field when we first started implementing COVID controls. But it's been interesting to see how quickly we've snapped back to that. So at Hanford, it's drawing close to the long-awaited goal of initiating tank waste treatment through the direct feed low activity waste or DFLAW program. This includes tank side cesium removal and vitrification, resulting low-level waste at the waste treatment plants, low activity waste facility. EM has proposed moving forward with a 2,000-gallon test bed initiative demonstration for low activity waste. The commencement of that proposed TBI demonstration is contingent on completion of evaluation and potential waste incidental to reprocessing of year determination. We began the 90-day public comment period on the draft year evaluation in November. Under the demonstration, low activity waste supernatant will be treated, pre-treated to remove cesium and other key radionuclides and routed, would then be disposed of at a licensed and permitted commercial low-level radioactive waste disposal facility in Texas or Utah. DOE also successfully demonstrated initial laboratory scale of this initiative several years ago. We've completed building and testing the tank side cesium removal TSCR system that will start treating tank waste in 2022. This will build up a supply to feed directly to the vitrification facility in 2023, and this was an EM 2021 priority. At Idaho, you want to go to Idaho slide? EM is preparing for the start of operations at the Integrated Waste Treatment Unit, or IWTU, which will treat the remaining about 900,000 gallons of liquid waste as a precursor to tank closure. The calcine retrieval and processing systems needed to make calcine high-level waste road ready are in the early stages of development. Mock-ups of the waste retrieval and bin set cleaning systems are being tested and ready for installation. And at Savannah River, under that slide, the salt waste processing facility began hot operations in January of 21. Expects to process up to 9 million gallons of waste per year by FY 2024, and by 2031, it's expected that nearly all the site's salt waste will be treated. We also completed construction of the Salt Stone Disposal Unit 7, or SDU 7, ahead of schedule and under the estimated cost. The safe construction of this SDU, combined with the approval to construct the last 3 SDUs, facilities completion facilitates completion of the mission to remove, treat all tank waste at Savannah Riverside. Defense waste processing facilities operated successfully for over 25 years in which brine sludge and higher activity tank waste, roughly half of the expected high-level radioactive waste class canisters, have been produced during a secure storage at the Savannah Riverside. We'll go to WIP. Thanks. Mining of panel 8 was finished in anticipation of receiving future waste. Foundation of the new filter building, a key part of the safety significant confinement ventilation system, was recently completed and progress continues with the new contractor. 700 CFAN testing and balancing was recently completed in October and will supply much needed airflow through the underground. On October 27th, the New Mexico Environmental Department Secretary approved a permit modification request to excavate a new utility shaft and associated connecting drifts. And to date, WIP has received approximately 13,000 shipments that were safely transported more than 15 million cumulative miles. Current shipping rates are about 5 to 7 shipments per week. The New Mexico appellate judge recently upheld a change in how the volume of waste disposed at the waste isolation pilot plant is counted. Under the revised counting method, the airspace found in certain waste packages is excluded from the calculation of volume of true waste disposed at WIP against the WIP land withdrawal act statutory capacity. And at other sites, we'll go to the next slide. At Moab, EM shipped more than 1 million tons of mill tailings for disposal in the fiscal year that ended September 30, the largest annual amount since FY 2012. Moab also celebrated the milestone of having removed a cumulative 12 million tons of uranium mill tailings away from the Colorado River and to safe disposal at the Crescent Junction, Utah site about 30 miles away. Excuse me. That puts us a step closer to the mission goal of relocating and disposing of 16 million tons of mill tailings from the Moab site. At Oak Ridge, EM successfully completed processing and disposing of low-dose inventory of stored U-233, ending a 2-year effort that has eliminated a portion of the site's legacy nuclear material and provided rare nuclear isotopes for next-generation cancer treatment research. With the low-dose U-233 inventory disposed, we will focus on treating and disposing the remaining high-dose uranium-233 inventory stored at Oak Ridge, which is a high priority for us. At Lattle, EM established a new processing line to stabilize and remove challenging excess liquid low-level radioactive waste containers to prepare the waste for shipment to an off-site licensed disposal facility. This new project enables EM to achieve greater efficiency in removing waste from Lattle and disposing of it safely off-site. Go to the last slide. So I'd like to turn it over to my team in EM4 for brief introductions and a short overview of their office activities. So Betsy Fornash is the Director of Infrastructure Management and Disposition Policy. Tonke is Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Waste and Materials Management. And Kristen Ellis is Acting Director of Regulatory, Intergovernmental, and Stakeholder Engagement. Kristen will also provide some additional information on implementation status of your latest regulatory recommendations. And again, thanks for all your time and efforts to help us advance our cleanup program. I look forward to ongoing communications and interactions. So Betsy, did you want to?
Sure. Just wanted to briefly introduce myself. I'm Betsy Fornash. Well, I'll explain what my office does, and then we'll cover what the name is. So we have two offices under me. One is infrastructure management. So that includes active infrastructure, fleet management, property transfers, as well as excess facilities and D&D. So those are some areas where we do have some, obviously, the on the ground work is executed out at the sites, but we are trying to ramp up our strategic planning in terms of our active infrastructure management. We're modeling some of what we're doing after the NNSA infrastructure management program, which has been pretty effective in helping them to tell the story of what they need, what the, you know, the investments that they're asking for, how they'll serve the current and future missions. And as well in the D&D realm, because I think there's a growing demand for us to fulfill the mission to conduct D&D, not only for the EM facilities, but on behalf of other program offices. So, you know, the work at Y12 is in that category, but NNSA, science, all have facilities that, you know, are excess now or projected to be excess in the foreseeable future. So we're trying to get, you know, some planning in place to make sure that that's being also like well integrated with EM's progress and priorities and mission mandates as well. We also cover climate action in my office, which has, I would say, changed dramatically over the past year. It was a little bit sleepier program a year ago than it is now. The administration has some pretty ambitious executive orders and requirements that have asked all departments to come up with climate action and resiliency plans. So we have a DOE plan that is guiding our actions. And I think, you know, it covers climate action and sort of maybe the more traditional sense that we think of it in terms of reducing our climate footprint, but also in terms of the resiliency of our sites as well. So there are a number of actions that are going to be happening on a department-wide basis to try to institutionalize climate action considerations and DOE directives in some of our decision-making processes. At the site level, what we're doing right now is working to begin updating vulnerability assessments, which have been conducted in the past, but we need to take another look at it in light of sort of new information and new methods and frankly, new expectations about the level of rigor that is being applied to those kinds of evaluations. So I think for climate action, there are some opportunities for us to serve as testing grounds, to improve our infrastructure. But I think fundamentally, when it comes down to it, the EM mission is really compatible with site resilience, right? I mean, the easiest way to reduce your risks is to remove your risks, take down excess facilities, remove, you know, contamination or, you know, or buried waste, things like that. So, so I think we feel happy about that alignment. And last but not least, we also cover groundwater and soil remediation from a policy perspective, including emerging contaminants. So PFAS is something that we are also working on actively right now, very quickly evolving realm. And, you know, we have a departmental policy that came out from S2 that says that we will be, it restricted ongoing use of PFAS, and we're working now on wrapping up a report that summarizes a survey that we did at EM sites on the past use and presence and monitoring regulatory inquiries about PFAS and looking towards the next steps to fill those information gaps. So.
Thanks,
you,
Betsy.
This
Doug,
is
go ahead.
Okay, Doug Tonke, and I know a few of you and others. It's good to meet you. I'm acting in the second of the organizations under Jay. Mark Senderling, my predecessor, decided to retire at the end of September, and so I'm trying to fill his shoes, as well as one of the offices below it. I'm the waste disposal office director in my normal capacity. So the Waste and Materials Management Group has 4 offices. We have a lot going on. In addition to that, Mark had worked to champion the high-level waste interpretation initiative that has been going on for the past couple of years. That resulted in changes to the DOE Order 435, allowing us a new tool in the toolbox to allow some waste streams that formerly, because high-level waste is a source-based definition, it allowed some of the less risky streams to be considered not reinterpreted under the definition as low-level waste. And the first waste stream was successfully chosen at Savannah River site, some DWPF wastewater, and analyzed. And we were able to move a small amount of that waste to prove the principle to a commercial low-level waste disposal site where it was treated and disposed successfully. We are currently, the administration is, obviously we had an administration change. They're reviewing that. We have a second waste stream teed up should we get the green light to move on that. And that is also at the Savannah River site. It is some contaminated equipment. So rather than a liquid stream, it's a solid stream. Things like bubblers from the DWPF facility that had touched some of the glass. And so our hope is to move that material, which is a continuing generating stream from DWPF and doesn't have a current path to disposal. Some of these components have to be stored there, and we're hoping that also to take advantage of commercial treatment and disposal for that. Should we get the green light on the review from this administration, a draft EA is ready to come out for public review, and we're hoping we'll get some decisions on that all very soon. The next off, that was the high-level waste sort of news. We do mostly policy work. The True Waste Program, our National True Program Office, is sort of an oversight office that works with the Carlsbad National True Program to ensure that the waste streams and the waste flowing to WIP are adequately characterized and certified. That office works also with the EPA headquarters organization, have an important role there as WIP is going through its certification. Recently, they've announced that the recertification application is complete. So they're going through the technical review phase for recertification, which goes every 5 years at WIP. And you heard all the good things about the construction going on at WIP to build up the infrastructure. And we do support all that and getting waste from the sites to WIP. I think it was mentioned one of the majority of the waste by agreement, or the more than half the waste, is coming from the Idaho site, and some of you know on that have been along the EM program that's where a majority of the legacy True Waste was, with a lot of waste from Rocky Flats shipped there, and we are working that inventory well down. My home office does primarily true waste, or low-level waste and mixed low-level waste work. We have one of the co-chairs of the low-level waste low-level waste disposal federal review group in our group. We are the regulatory arm of DOE that is looking at our disposal, the performance of our disposal facilities, and sort of akin to a licensing action that a commercial facility would go over. We convene review groups and panels to look at during the various lifetime of the low-level waste facilities, prior to construction, prior to operation, during operation and closure, to make sure that the facilities are operating in a compliant manner and will be protective of the environment and the public for thousands of years to come. So that's an important job. We take it very seriously. Every year, the headquarters organization is reviewing the site's annual summary reports for the facilities, and EM sort of coordinates it for the department, but we do have some sites operated by NNSA and NE. In addition, my program collects the metrics for the department on low-level waste and mixed low-level waste. We use those for a variety of sources, and we're updating those right now. We have a number of other programs. We do the elemental mercury management program that is required by the Mercury Export Ban Act. We're trying to establish a storage capability in the future for nationwide elemental, which is non-radioactive mercury, which cannot be exported, and currently there's no treatment and disposal path in the U.S., although we are hoping that will change in the near future as some companies in the marketplace are petitioning EPA. There's no LDR right now that allows that, but we're hoping that'll change. We're involved in international activities with the IEA, EA, and 87, I think now, members of the Joint Convention on the Safety of Spent Fuel Management and on the Safety of Radioactive Waste Management, a treaty the U.S. entered in and was instrumental in developing post the Chernobyl accident to increase the global safety culture around the country. We're also involved in a number of other, it's quite a portfolio. If anyone needs waste disposal, we provide policy assistance. We try to maintain multiple disposal options for low-level waste because we know that problems can crop up, but we have available at least 2 licensed low-level waste disposal facilities. Recently, we issued a year or so ago the SEIS and the record of decision for disposal of depleted uranium, allowing converted oxide materials from Portsmouth and Paducah to be disposed. And we named 2 commercial facilities if they were licensed, and the Nevada Area 5 site as potential places for depleted uranium disposal. Certainly the commercial businesses are very interested in taking that into their disposal facilities. Currently, Waste Control Specialist in Texas is licensed for depleted uranium disposal, and Energy Solutions in Utah has been in pre-licensing discussions about possibly a license there. We did analyze both of those sites in our SEIS. And I guess I've rambled on here. We have 2 other offices. The Nuclear Materials Office, they take care of policy on spent fuel and nuclear materials for the department. They are very much working closely with Savannah River on canyon operations at H Canyon, and working with the other programs, particularly NE on spent fuel. And finally, our packaging and transportation group handles those activities outside of the NNSA for the department. They are in the process of revising the DOE order on transportation, resolving final comments on that. So we're hoping that will get out soon. And they have some 40 different dockets going with packaging certification. So when people want to move something in a type B or difficult package, they're the folks that Dr. Schuler's program does the certification on that. So I will stop there and turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you, Doug. And it's nice to see some folks that I saw last week at the cleanup workshop, but also some folks that were on EMAB back when I was the DFO for EMAB a little while ago. Happy to have maybe this is our last virtual meeting for EMAB. I'm not going to make that much of a bold prediction there, but echo the sentiments that folks had shared previously about the good and the bad of virtual. And so here's yet another virtual meeting for us. Just wanted to take a couple minutes and reintroduce myself for those who I don't know. I am part of this acting EM4 team, and I think we covered all of the retirements and acting, so I won't repeat those again. But sometimes I find it easier to give an org chart out to everyone. But as Ike mentioned, Mary Kruger moved over to the EM5 portion of the organization, and she's got the HR mission and the budget mission now. And so they asked me to come over in her role in an acting capacity in June. So I've been doing that since June. And one of the first things that I got briefed on in June was the regulatory recommendations that EMAB came up with. And it's great to see you all still involved in giving us such great recommendations. And as mentioned before, with all of those retirements, that's had an impact on kind of our next steps there. But I did want to give you guys information that we've had a lot of conversations about them. And we really appreciate your thoughtful recommendations there. You know, the power and the influence that EMA allows us to help with our decision making is such a great resource. And I'm glad that we're still able to work so collaboratively with you all. And I wanted to give you guys a quick update that we have been able to implement some of the recommendations in your report. We've been working with the sites on a framework for collaborative regulatory engagement, and that's envisioned to supplement the current approaches with our regulatory partners. I know that Shelley mentioned some of those successes earlier in her remarks with Ike. And I think it's an important first step for us to continue to continuously look for ways to re-engage with our regulators moving forward as we're making some of the hard decisions into the future. I also really wanted to thank you for the recommendation about potential opportunities for engagement with regulatory parties in places when there's other sites where we're trying to seek parity across the program, and when we have challenges on the interfaces on laws like CERCLA and RCRA and trying to work out those things. And then also exploring additional criteria for when we're identifying the point of compliance. So I think what you've laid out there is really helpful. And it's our hope that, having these coordinations with our regulatory partners on the complex regulatory issues will help us have agreements in a quicker way. And that lines well with what Ike was saying about alignment. When there's a shared vision, it's so much easier to have project success. Also wanted to let you all know that we have had we've been able to hold radioactive waste management training for stakeholders with the state of South Carolina about tank farm closure activities. And, we're using that as kind of a benchmark for some other potential activities into the future. And we've been working a lot with EPA and the Tennessee Department of Health and Environmental Conservation. And again, that was, informed by your recommendations in the report from earlier this year. So thanks again for all your support there, and great to see everyone again. I'm so excited to be working with EMAB again and being back in EM again. I think most of you know, and if you didn't, I was working up in the office of the undersecretary from the EMAB alumni, who was our former undersecretary, Paul DeBar, for those of you who have been on the board for a while. So as I mentioned, back to EM and enjoying working with everyone again. And I think at this point, we'll open it up for questions that you all may have for any of us here in our acting or permanent capacities. So I guess turn it back over to Jack to facilitate questions.
Great, thanks everyone. I see a few questions here. We'll go with Fraser Lockhart first.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I don't know if this would go to Kristen or to Jay, but clearly in the first session with Ike, he stressed his commitment and focus on the regulatory relationships and the trust, and Jay kind of covered a couple highlights of sites, Savannah River, Oak Ridge in particular, where that seems to be very strong and productive relationships. I guess my question goes to the other side of it. If you could comment on maybe the one or two sites where those regulatory relationships are currently the most challenging, and how EM is trying to improve those relationships.
Well, that's an easy one. I'm joking. Well, I do think one example that might be a good one to discuss is Oak Ridge. And we've been working very closely on trying to get a ROD in place for the EMDF, which is the EM disposal facility. You know, Amy spent a lot of time on this one. And, you know, that one we had an EPA decision at the end of 2020. And then with the start of the new administration, I know EPA was relooking at that agreement. So we've started a whole slew of other conversations with TDEC and the EPA region office and the headquarters office. And, you know, one of the things that came up at the start of the administration was they wanted to make sure that we were addressing any stakeholder concerns in a way that was consistent with some of the priorities in the Biden administration. So we kind of took a step back and built an enhanced stakeholder strategy for our conversations at EM on the EMDF, and working very closely with EPA, regional headquarters, and community engagement folks to kind of build our expertise there. And so that's been an ongoing activity, and we're trying to work to reach agreement among the three parties for the last kind of sets of steps to get us to the ROD. And I know Jay was working this one before he came up in his acting EM4 role. But that's a good example. And I think, you know, again, you all have had enough depth with the program that you've seen the ebb and flow of, you know, when there's alignment and when there's a complete agreement on an issue. That certainly does make it the easiest way. It's kind of like shades of gray on the rest of it. I got a question at the cleanup workshop last week about consent-based siting. And that's another one of those things that, you know, it depends who you ask. If how you define consent, and, you know, does who you're asking have a different perspective than someone who's maybe hundreds of miles away. So there are different challenges that exist all across the complex, and we're always looking at ways that we can build on successful relationships like the South Carolina experience with Shelley and teams, and looking at new frameworks that address, you know, the new realities that we're facing. So I'll stop there, and I see lots of raised hands. So one of you cognizant of our time here, so I'll stop.
Thanks, Shelley, you're next.
Yes, thanks, Kristen, for all that info. So my other big passion is high-level waste. This is a question for Doug. And I was wondering if the current National Defense Authorization Act, in whatever form it's in, if you've seen any kind of language in there that might restrict the use of the high-level waste interpretation and money associated with that pertaining to Hanford waste. So if there's anything in the current NDAA or thoughts or what you're hearing about it that might be the past 2 years of restrictions.
I know that the language has been floating around and being marked up, so we certainly don't have a final bill yet, but nonetheless, I think this is sort of wrapped up in some of the holistic discussions that are going on with Hanford, and it gets back to exactly what Ike was saying, trust and working together. And that's why I said it's a tool in the toolbox. We are moving forward with some weirs at Hanford. They sort of get us to the same place. But I think this is an evolving thing that's situation. And I don't know if Jay wants to say anything more about that, but I think that's about as far as I'll go with it.
I don't know there is much more to say.
Yeah.
I think the latest version of the NDAA that we've seen doesn't have language in it, which has surprised everybody.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. And again, I'll just say congratulations for adding that tool to your toolbox.
We thank the, with, as you said, the alignment with folks in South Carolina that allowed us to demonstrate it and really bring it forward. It was definitely a partnership between the headquarters organization and our SRS site, quite a team effort there to bring home the first one, and we're working very closely on the second one.
Thanks. I see one other hand up, and it's David Abelson.
Thanks, Jack. Kristen, this question is for you. And I'm sure you can guess roughly what it is. But specifically, you use the term enhanced stakeholder engagement. And my question is, what does headquarters mean by the word enhanced these days? It's come up a couple of times today. It came up obviously last week. So I'm sort of curious.
Well, I think I learned the term of art from our EPA colleagues, and the way that as we've had these conversations about Oak Ridge and how it's building, I think it encompasses several things, like it's incorporating all impacted stakeholders. So that reflects kind of the values of environmental justice, and it encompasses more than one way of communicating information. And this is a topic, sometimes we may have struggled with in EM over the years, and that we have brilliant scientists and engineers who perhaps don't make the most understandable to lay people PowerPoints. Just going to go out on a limb there. And so, striving for plain language, striving for ways to communicate what we're attempting to execute on in a way that's understandable to a number of audiences. It could mean translation into another language. It could include looking at social media instead of, I think you look at the traditional, if you looked at the EIS process or the ROD process, and it was 1997, I think you could expect a lot of things like mailers and signs at the library for a government action that was coming up. I think the kind of enhanced stakeholder strategies are trying to reflect ways that maybe other people get their information on Twitter or Instagram. So just having a suite of options and a suite of ways for people to participate. And again, some of this is going to be influenced by the pandemic, and that we can't have, I think that the public meetings of the past where you go and show up in a room may not look the same moving forward, but what does it look like on Zoom? What time do we have the meeting so that it's available for impacted stakeholders? How are we reaching out to people in advance? Are we doing targeted emails, or are we just, like I said, putting it passively on a web page? So I don't think there's one set objective definition, but this is what we've learned from EPA and the community involvement best practices and what they've communicated as the expectations for how we're thinking about stakeholders moving forward in this administration.
A quick follow-up question. Do you see that enhanced stakeholder and alignments with the key parties to be part of the same process?
I think it can be. I recognize that I'm sure the state government partners and the EPA are having similar issues in that, when we are communicating about things, they're getting questions from their stakeholders, and giving everybody a baseline level of understanding and getting everybody in agreement about what it is we're discussing is going to be a key part in getting alignment and getting support and getting understanding. So I know most of our stakeholders tend to be very engaged and familiar with the program, but there's still plenty of Americans out there who don't have a lot of exposure to the environmental cleanup mission. And that gets into some of these issues of, how we're communicating about the program to someone who maybe is a chemical engineer versus someone who read about us on Twitter one day. So you don't know how people are going to be coming to the program, and making sure we have the same level of baseline understanding before we start talking about whatever we're doing next.
Thanks.
No problem.
Okay, Jay and the team there, thank you very much for your information today. Our agenda has us taking a break here at 2:30, which we will do here shortly. And then I see Melinda Comfort is on. So at 2:40 sharp, we will begin our ethics briefing. So until then, we will be adjourned, looks like for about 10 minutes. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Good to see y'all.
Hi, Melinda. How are you today?
Hi, I'm fine. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, great, wonderful.
So I see we have about 1 minute.
Okay,
We'll try to get started here right at 2:40,
okay, great.
and then I'll give you a heads up. We can get started.
All right, wonderful.
All right, it looks like we have most people back. It is 2:40, so I'm going to turn it over to Melinda Comfort from the Department of Energy, and we're going to do our annual ethics presentation. So Melinda, over to you.
Thanks so much. As many of you know, I'm Melinda Comfort. I'm with the General Counsel's office. I'm with the General Counsel's office, not in it. I haven't been in it in almost a year now, but such is life. So I'm going to somewhat refer to this presentation, which is no surprise. I think you've all seen it before. Is someone changing the slide? Should I say something, or do I do that myself?
Yep, so I'm here to change them for you.
Okay, great. So I'm on the first slide with all my contact information, and I always encourage people to contact me as need be. Next slide. Why are we having this briefing? Because wonderfully, you are a special government employee, and many of the rules that apply to you, many of the ethics rules that apply to me as a full-time Fed also apply to you, which includes that if you're on an advisory committee as an SGE, every year you must have an ethics briefing. Next slide. The 14 principles of ethical conduct. This is the basis of many of the ethics rules that came out of an executive order some years ago. I don't go over all 14, but I always do like to read the first one. Public service is a public trust, and your loyalty is to the Constitution, the laws and ethical principles above private gain and I will repeat as I always do, if you follow that rule, you can never make a wrong choice. And the other rules are important, other principles are there for you to read some magical day. But if you just always remember that public service is a public trust and your loyalty is really to the American people, you can't make a wrong decision. Next slide. Just drills down in bullet form what I just mentioned: public service, public trust. You shouldn't have financial conflicting interests, and you should avoid even the appearance of impropriety. Next slide. What we're going to talk about is listed here. No surprise, it hasn't changed. The rules haven't changed, but we always need to be reminded of them. So we're going to talk about financial conflicts of interest, relationship conflicts, representation restrictions, misuse of position, and gifts. Next slide. So getting started, diving right in, the very big one, a federal criminal statute says that you should not participate in anything that will have a direct and predictable effect on your financial interests or those persons whose interests are imputed to you. So what does all that mean? It basically means if you have a financial interest in something, you shouldn't be working on a committee matter that could affect those financial interests. Next slide. It lists those persons whose interests are imputed to you, which means it's just the same as if you had the financial interest, if these persons have a financial interest that conflicts with committee work. No surprise, your spouse's employment is imputed to you, minor children, people you're in partnerships with, organizations you serve as employees, et cetera. And somewhat often overlooked is when you're negotiating for employment. And that means if you're having any two-way conversation with somebody about a job, that means you have a financial interest in that entity and you shouldn't work on anything that will have a direct and predictable effect on that entity. Next slide. So when we say you shouldn't participate in a particular matter, what are we talking about? Particular matters can be specific party matters, like a contract, a grant, an agreement, litigation. Every national laboratory, as you know, is run per an M&O contract. That is a specific party matter. But particular matters can also be things like proposed legislation, policy matters, which can be the focus of some of committee work. But we're not talking about things that are so super broad. If you're working on something that will affect every man, woman, and child in America, every plant, mineral, and vegetable, that's probably too broad. But if you can identify who the policy is going to impact, if you can identify what parties, what types of entities, that might be a particular matter. And if you have a financial interest, including an imputed financial interest that could be affected by that policy, you shouldn't be working on it. Next slide. Sometimes it's not your finances, but your relationships that can cause a conflict. There is a regulation, not a criminal statute, but still important. There's a regulation that says that you should not work on matters where someone you have a close or what's called a covered relationship is involved. And under this regulation, you have a close or what we call a covered relationship with your spouse and your dependent child's employer, members of your household, close relatives, your former employer for 12 months, people you're in business with, organizations you actively participate in, whether you get paid or not, and people you're trying to do business with. So for example, if your twin brother is the vice president of an environmental management company, you don't have a financial interest in that company, but you can understand people might question your impartiality if you worked on something involving that company because of your close relationship with your twin brother. Next slide. So if you do have a conflict, financial, relationship, obviously the best thing to do is just to recuse, back away, step away, make sure the committee manager knows. And sometimes it's actually going to be the committee manager who maybe first reaches out to you to discuss it, no matter, as long as it gets vetted. And you seek ethics advice to ensure you really have a conflict and what's the best way to handle it. Sometimes there are tools that we can use if it's super important that you work on something and it's a financial interest that is involved. Sometimes we can issue a waiver. Sometimes if it's a relationship conflict, we can issue an authorization that could allow you to work on some things where you have a conflict, depending on how great the need is for your service. And then there's just a number of built-in exemptions. For example, if a conflict is caused by stock and you have $15,000 or less, that's considered de minimis and you can usually continue to work on the matter. If this conflict involves your employer and you don't have a stock interest in your employer, so for example, if you're a university professor and the conflict is caused by the university you work for, you can usually continue to work on the matter as long as the matter is not going to have a special or super unique effect on your university. So for example, if you're working on a policy that can affect all universities that begin with the letter M, for example, you can continue to work on it as long as it's not going to have a special or unique effect on your university. Next slide. This is where I like to thank everybody for doing their financial disclosure form. I know you have already done them for this year, and I can't tell you how super appreciative I am. And I know it's additional work, and especially in this virtual environment, maybe it's harder to do, I don't know. But it is an important tool that we use to identify conflicts and ensure that we're protecting the integrity of the committee's work. And our office is actually required to report to the Office of Government Ethics, the big ethics agency here in DC, that we actually get a financial disclosure form from each and every one of you. So when you fill them in and return them, I super appreciate it. Next slide. So let's talk about representation restrictions. Me as a full-time Fed, I am prohibited from representing anybody else before the federal government on any matter. So for example, if my neighbor has a tax problem and I'm this super smart tax guru, I can't represent him before the IRS on that tax matter, whether he pays me or not. But for you, your representation restrictions are somewhat limited. You cannot represent an outside entity before the government on something that involves a committee matter. So for example, if you've got other things going with other agencies, other grants, what contracts, whatever it is, you can make representations. That is, you can appear, talk to, interact with government officials on behalf of that outside entity. But if it involves a committee matter, you have to keep in mind that you're a special government employee, which means you're representing the people. You're there really because you're a subject matter expert on in a certain field. And again, your viewpoint is that of a government, not of an outside entity. So when it comes to committee matters, you cannot represent an outside entity before DOE or any other parts of the government. But on other matters that don't involve the committee, you're free to make representations on behalf of others. Next slide. Misuse of position. Just a reminder that your status as an SGE, your official title, belongs to the government, and it's to be used for official matters. You're not supposed to be using your official title and your whatever connections, et cetera, your SGE status brings you. You're not supposed to be using those to advance the interests of outside persons and organizations that you might be affiliated with. Obviously, the fact that you're on this committee becomes a part of who you are. It can be on your resume, et cetera, but the idea is that you're not trading on it to advance your interests or other persons that you know. Next slide. Talk very briefly about gifts. Keep in mind that there is a gift rule that basically says we don't accept gifts unless an exception applies. This slide tells you that a gift can be almost anything. It doesn't always have to be wrapped up in a big box with a bow. It can be entertainment, hospitality, a favor, training, travel. Anything that has a value is basically a gift. Next slide. And again, as I said, the basic rule is we don't accept gifts if they're given because of our official position, or if they're given from what we call outside sources. And outside sources are persons who do business with the government, want to do business with the government, can be affected by the work we do. So obviously, when we're talking about folks who do business with the government, that includes DOE contractors, which includes all the wonderful people who manage and operate our laboratories. And we don't accept gifts from them unless an exception applies. There are a number of exceptions. I've listed a few there on the slide. If it's totally based on an outside business activity, personal relationship, or it's just such a small level gift, $20 or less, and you don't accept $50 or more, it's okay to accept. But you should always be guided by the fact that sometimes it's best just to say no. Next slide. Well, that's it. Just remember, avoid those conflicting financial interests, avoid even the appearance of an issue, recuse when there's a conflict, and please always reach out to me. So subject to any questions, that's your annual ethics briefing. Are there any questions? Well, I'll take that to mean there are no questions.
I see one, Melinda.
Oh, question. Okay.
It's Fraser.
Yeah, thanks for a great briefing, Melinda. Always good to have those reminders. I wondered if you could tell us what the schedule is going to be for the financial disclosure update, and if there's any changes in the form or when you might be sending out that form.
You all have already done it for 2021, and if you haven't, please get it in. But actually, there's no set due dates for next year. It kind of coincides with when you're going to meet. You need to do it in advance of when you're going to meet next year. So that's to be determined.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't think so, Melinda. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, thank you for having me, and enjoy if there's more meetings to follow. Enjoy.
Thanks.
Bye.
So I'm going to ask Alyssa, do we have any other business for today? I see Alyssa there.
Yep, nope. And Kelly, I don't know if you have anything, but I don't.
Kelly?
Just have a couple of things I wanted to update everybody on. First, thank you so much for doing the attestation several weeks ago. I know that was not an easy process. I know you had to do things multiple times, but we have provided all of the required information into the vaccination tracking system. And so thank you very much for doing that. I did want to update you guys that we are still working on getting the current membership package approved. We're hoping that we get an update in the next couple of weeks. As part of that package, we are trying to bring on board a couple new members. And so I think that is exciting that we're going to get to have some new perspectives coming in. We're also in the process of looking at new charges for the board. What we wanted to do is make sure we had the new members on board so that they could participate in the new charges. And that goes the same for leadership of the board. We wanted to make sure we had, a full roster again moving forward before we made any decisions regarding leadership. And speaking of leadership, Jack, thank you so much. I know that you have been in the vice chair role a lot longer than you had planned. And so thank you so much. You've done a wonderful job as acting as the chair as well. And we just appreciate everybody's service. We know you're all very, very busy. And if you have any questions or you need any assistance with anything, you can reach out to myself or Alyssa. We're happy to help in anything that you need help with. And hopefully I'll be having good information soon about the appointment packages that it's been approved, and get additional term time for those who are seeking additional terms.
So Kelly, I see a couple questions here. I see Jim Rispoli and Amy. So Jim, you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Jack. I had put my hand up to thank Alyssa and Kelly, but especially to thank you for being such an effective chair and giving your time to helping us stay organized. And then, of course, wish everyone a really nice holiday season. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Amy.
Yeah, I want to echo what Jim said. We appreciate everything you've done. I know it's not easy to herd everybody together, especially when you're trying to work from home and take care of your other business. So I wanted to just ask if I think Ike and maybe Jay and Kelly, Kristen all went through some of the different appointments and changes and who's acting in what role now. Could you maybe either part of the minutes or maybe in a separate email just give us the update on those so we know, like who's replaced Mark Cinder? I tried to jot some notes down, but somebody said, oh, maybe we just have an org chart or something. But at your convenience, could we maybe have an update with those names and positions so we can try to keep straight all of that really important and good information? So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get that out to everybody. I know that you all know it changes quite often. So we will make sure to add the EMAB on our list of when we get a new org chart. Also, we'll just start making it an automatic practice to send it out to the entire board. But we will get you something this week with the information that Ike had given us.
Great, thanks. And I want to also thank Kelly and Alyssa. They've made my job a lot easier over the last 2 years, and I just want to thank them for all their support. And once again, thanks to our speakers today, Ike, Jay, Betsy, Doug, Kristen, all of them did a great job and taking the time to answer our questions also. So with that, I guess we are adjourned, and everybody have a safe holiday, and we'll see you sometime early next year, hopefully. Thanks.
Thank you.